I went home with my head in the clouds and my heart on fire with love. All that week, I could not stop thinking about Lorna, and I did my work on the farm in a dream. Soon, I went to see her again. This time, when she saw me, she came quickly towards me. "Mr. Ridd, are you mad?" she said. "There are men on guard all round the valley. We must hide at once." She took my hand and led me to her secret place, which was a kind of room hidden in the rock of the mountain. It was a green, peaceful place, open to the sky above, but the only way into it was through a narrow entrance in a cave. I gave her the eggs I had brought her as a present, and at this she began to cry. "What have I done?" I asked. "It's nothing you've done," she said. "It's just a sadness that I feel when I see anything from the world outside. And you've been very kind, and I'm not used to kindness." I wanted to put my arms around her and kiss her, but I knew this would be wrong. So I sat and listened, and I think this made her like me more, because she began to tell me her life story. She told me everything except what her feelings were towards John Ridd. "Only 2 people ever listened to me or try to help me," she began. "One is my grandfather, Sir Ensor Doone, and the other is my uncle, a clever man whom they call the Counsellor. My grandfather is a very old and very hard man, except with me. He seems to know what is right and wrong, but not to want to think about it. And the Counsellor smiles a lot and talks about what is right and good, but he never does a good thing himself. My Aunt Sabina used to take care of me, and she taught me very carefully. She was a good person, honest and kind, and when she died, it was like losing a mother. Now there is only one woman I can talk to, Gwenny, my servant. She is my closest friend. I don't remember my father, but they say he was the eldest son of Sir Ensor Doone, and the bravest and best of them all. They say, because of that I am their queen. I dream of a world outside this one, Mr. Ridd, a world of peace. This valley is green and beautiful, but all around me is violence and robbery and stupid behavior. I can't come down to their level. I can't forget myself and live like them. And strange questions come to me that they can never answer. When I try to think about the past, about my early childhood, I can't remember anything. I want to know what I am and why I am in this place. I suppose you think that's strange. Perhaps people who are happy and at peace don't need to ask questions like those. Here, Lorna began to cry again. I could think of nothing to say, but I dried her eyes for her. "Mr. Ridd, I am ashamed and angry at myself for talking so much like this. But you, who have a mother who loves you, and sisters, and a quiet home, can't tell how lonely it is to live as I do. I have this secret place to come to because I begged them for it. Only grandfather and the councillor come here, and sometimes Carver, the councillor's son. No one in the valley is as strong or brave as him, but he is not like his father. He is rough and violent, always quick to be angry, and will listen to no opinion except his own. There is talk of him wanting to marry me, but I would rather die than marry Carver Doone. Now you see how unhappy I am here. I would escape and go anywhere, but I know it would hurt my grandfather." This was too much for Lorna, and she couldn't tell me any more. She broke down and cried. I talked to her gently and kindly until she began to worry again about the danger I was in. I said I would come back and see her again, but she made me promise not to come back for another month, so that I would not add to her problems with fears about me. During that time, we agreed that if she were in any danger, she would put a dark coat over a white rock near her secret room. I would be able to see this from a hill above the valley, and then I would come. Chapter 5. To London. But I was not able to see Lorna again as soon as I had hoped. Before the month had passed, I was called away from home in a very strange and unexpected way. One afternoon, as I was outside the house feeding the horses, a stranger rode up to our gate and shouted at me. He was a tough-looking, hard-faced man about 40 years old, with small, quick eyes, and he was dressed very differently from the way we dress in Exmoor. He said he was looking for Plover's Barrows Farm and a man called John Ridd. When I told him he had found them both, he introduced himself as Jeremy Stickles, a servant of the king, and he gave me a letter. I looked at him in alarm, but he said there was nothing in the letter to worry me. At the top of the letter, my name was written in large letters. I read, "To John Ridd, this letter is to order you to appear before the king's judges in London and tell them anything you know about some matters which may be harmful to the king and the country." Jeremy Stickles seemed very pleased by my fear and surprise at the letter, but he said again that no one was going to hurt me. All I had to do was tell the truth. When my mother read the letter, she became very worried and began to cry. She wondered how the king had heard of me and what he wanted to do with me. But Mr. Stickles, who wasn't really as hard as he seemed, explained everything carefully to her. He told her that the king only knew of me because the stories of my great size and strength had reached even London. He had heard I was a good man and thought I could help him, that was all. This made my mother feel better, but I was very unhappy. I was thinking of Lorna. How could I tell her I was going away? I had promised not to go back to the valley for a month, and that was still a few days away. But how terrible it would be if she came to look for me at the end of the month and I was not there. I would have to break my promise and go before the agreed time. Mr. Stickles was happy to stay at the farm for 1 or 2 days to try our good Exmoor food, so I used the time to look for Lorna. But I saw nothing of her in the valley, and no signal that she needed me. There was nothing else I could do. Mr. Stickles wanted to go, and I had to leave for London without seeing her. A journey to London was both long and dangerous in those days because of all the robbers on the roads. As I said goodbye to my mother and sisters and took my last look at the farmhouse, I felt very miserable. But Jeremy Stickles was a good companion. As we rode, he told me many amusing stories of London life, and we became the best of friends. I did not like London. It was a crowded, dirty place, not at all like Exmoor, and, even worse, I had to wait more than 2 months before the King's judges were ready to see me. There was a lot of trouble in London at that time, with arguments between the King and the City of London. Nobody had time to talk to John Ridd, but I was not allowed to leave and go home. At last, I was called to see Judge Jeffreys. Jeremy Stickles had told me about Judge Jeffreys. He was the King's chief judge, and there were terrible stories about him. He became very angry if anyone argued with him, and he had sent many of the King's enemies to their deaths. In the room I walked into, there were 3 men sitting on high seats, and they were dressed in very rich clothes. In front of each of them was a desk with pen and paper. The man in the middle seemed to be the most important. He was a big, heavy man with a square chin and a kind of fire in his eyes. He was a man that almost anyone would be afraid of. This was certainly Judge Jeffreys. He gave me a terrible stare and asked me who I was and where I came from. When I had told him, he said, "Well done, John Ridd. You have answered me without fear. I remember this matter now. I will ask you some questions." He looked at me more closely. "In Exmoor," he said, "there is a family of robbers. Is that true?" I told him it was. "And why isn't your local judge doing anything about them?" "I suppose he's afraid, my lord. The robbers are very strong, and their valley is hard to attack." "But they must still answer to the law," Judge Jeffreys said. "What's the name of these people, and how many of them are there?" "They are the Doones, and we think there are about 40 men in the valley." "I will do something about these thieves," he said. "Perhaps I will come down to the west myself." But then he stared hard at me again and asked, "Is there any sign in Exmoor of any dislike of the king?" "No, my lord. We don't know much about him." "That's a good answer," he laughed. "But the king knows he has enemies in the country. I see you know nothing about them, though. You're a good man, John Ridd. Keep out of trouble. Keep away from the king's enemies, and from the Doones as well, and you will be safe." I was going to use you as a spy, but I see you're too honest. I will send someone else, but never tell anyone what I've said to you." Here he stared at me very angrily, but when he saw he had frightened me enough, he smiled again. "Now go home, John. I will remember you, and I don't think you will forget me." I had no money left to hire a horse for the journey back to Exmoor, so I had to walk the whole way. It took me 7 days, and I was very glad to get home again. Chapter 6. Lorna's New Troubles. When I arrived at the farm, Mother held me tightly and cried for half an hour. I gave everyone all the presents I had bought for them in London, but of course, what I wanted to do most of all was find Lorna and see how she was. I wanted to tell Mother all about her, but the thought of my father's murder by the dunes stopped me. There was little chance that Lorna would love me, so why should I worry my mother about it? As soon as I could, I went to Doon Valley, but there I could not believe my bad luck. When I looked from the cliff top, I saw Lorna's sign, her coat on a white rock. She had needed me, and now perhaps I was too late to help her. I climbed round the outer cliffs to the waterfall, and was soon looking down towards the green fields of the valley. I stood and waited, not caring now if anyone saw me. And then, at last, a little figure came towards me. I could see she was frightened, so I went towards her slowly. "Miss Lorna, I saw your sign on the white rock that you needed me." "Oh yes, but that was a long time ago. 2 months or more, sir." And she looked away. She looked so sad that I thought everything was over between us, and tried to turn away and go. But when she saw that I was hurt and ashamed, she ran towards me and took my hands. "Oh, John, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. How happy I was to hear her call me John. Then she led me away to her secret room, through the cave in the mountain. Since it was partly open to the sky, plants and flowers were able to grow there, and now, in the late summer, it was beautiful. She could not look at me at first, but when she did, I could see that she had been crying. "My grandfather is not well," she said, "and now Carver Doone and his evil father, the councillor, have more control over the dunes. They want me to marry Carver. Not immediately, I am only 17, but they want me to give my promise in front of my grandfather that I will marry Carver. They say it's for the peace of the dunes. That's why I left the signal out for you, Mr. Ridd. They wanted to force me, but my grandfather would not let them. They won't do it, at least while grandfather is alive. But they're watching me and following me, and I can't go where I want anymore. Gwenny is helping me. If she wasn't, I couldn't even be here talking to you. But perhaps even you don't care about me anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and I quickly explained about my journey to London. I told her how much I had missed her and how I had worried about her all this time. Then I showed her the present I had brought her from London, a ring with blue and white stones. At first, she cried even more, and then came and sat so close to me that I began to tremble. Then I picked up her hand, and while I was pretending to look at its beauty and softness, put the ring on her finger. "Oh, Mr. Ridd," she said, her face going red. "I thought you were much too honest and simple ever to do something like this. No wonder you are good at catching fish. But no, John, you have not caught me yet, not completely, though I like you very much. And if you will only keep away, out of danger, I will like you even more." With tears still in her eyes, which seemed to come partly from wanting to love me as much as I loved her, she kissed my head. Then she gently took my ring off her finger and, kissing it 3 times, gave it back to me. "John, I cannot take it now," she said. "It would not be right. I will try to love you dearly as you could wish. Keep the ring for me until then. Something tells me I will earn it very soon." This time, I promised Lorna that I would not come back to see her for 2 months. If Carver or the counsellor became violent towards her, she would signal me as before. 2 months was a long time to wait, but because of what she had said to me, I was happy. Very soon after that, I told my sister Annie about Lorna. I knew she would keep my secret, and it was good to be able to talk to her about my troubles. Then she gave me a surprise. Tom Faggus had asked her to marry him, and she had agreed. But although Mother liked Tom, we both knew she would not like her daughter to marry him. And how would she feel about me wanting to marry Lorna Doone? We promised to help each other if we could. On the very first day after the agreed 2 months, I went to find Lorna. But this time, when I got to the top of the waterfall, she was not there. I waited for hours, but she didn't come. Then I saw something that made me afraid for her. While I was hiding behind a tree, a big man appeared, walking lazily down the valley. He wore a wide hat, a dark jacket, and tall boots, and he carried a gun over his shoulder. As he came closer, I could see his face clearly, and there was something in it that turned me cold with a kind of horror. It was a face that never smiled, and in his eyes was only cruelty. I did not doubt that this was Carver Doone. And this was the man, I thought angrily, who planned to marry Lorna. He had no idea I was there, but I almost hoped he would discover me. If we could fight hand to hand, a fight between us would be fair, as he was the only man I knew who was near my size. But I knew it would be a mistake to fight Carver. Whether I won or lost, the Doones would learn about me, and I would never see Lorna again. When by the evening Lorna had still not appeared, I went home. I went back to the valley every day for 2 weeks. but never saw Lorna. I saw Carver Doone again, though, walking with his gun round the top of the valley, and that worried me. I was sure that Lorna was in danger. I would go into Doone Valley and find her. This time, I decided to go by the Doone Gate. It was a dangerous route, but I knew it would be useful to know how the Doones defended the main entrance to their valley. At night, the Doone Gate, with its tall black cliffs and sharp rocks, was a frightening place. There were no guards outside, and very quietly and carefully I entered the narrow, dark path between the cliffs. Soon I saw a light shining round a corner of the cliff, and staying close to the rock wall, I stepped carefully up to the corner and looked round it. 2 guards were sitting by the light with their guns on the ground beside them. Here the cliffs widened out into broken, rocky ground with deep shadows between the rocks. The guards were clearly not expecting an attack and were drinking and talking. I stood and watched, and while I was wondering what to do, they began to argue and then to fight. This gave me my chance. I went slowly along the cliff wall and then moved quickly into the shadows of the open rocky ground. The guards were so busy with their fight that they did not see or hear me, and I was soon past them and going down the hillside into Doone Valley. Lorna had told me that her grandfather's house was the first one after the gate. So, carefully and quietly, I went towards it and stood below one of the windows. I could not shout or call out because there were other guards around the small village, but luck was with me that night. Lorna came to the window, opened it, and looked out up at the night sky. I whispered her name. She jumped in alarm, but then looked down and saw who I was. "John," she said. "Oh, John, you must be mad." "I was going mad because I didn't know what had happened to you, but you knew I would come." "I hoped you would, but do you see, they have put these bars across my window." She put her hand out through them, and I took it and kissed it, and then held both her hands in mine. "Oh, John, you'll make me cry," she said, though I could see she had already been crying. "We can never be together. Why should I make you unhappy? Try to forget me." "Never," I said. "If we want to belong to one another, Lorna, no one can stop us. Only God, if he wishes it. Now, tell me, why have you been kept in prison here?" "My grandfather is very ill now. I am afraid he won't live long. The councillor and his son are the masters of the valley. They want me here where they can see me, so that I can't escape from Carver. And Gwenny is not allowed to move about now, so I couldn't send you a message or signal you. You must watch this house day and night, John, if you wish to save me. There is nothing they wouldn't do if my poor grandfather... Oh, I can't think only of myself when I should think of him. How can I leave you even one more night here, Lorna?" I said. "You must, John," she said. "You're so brave, but I love you too much to let you stay any longer. Yes, it's true, but I cannot leave my grandfather while he is dying. So if you love me, John, you must go. I'll go for now, but when I hear that your grandfather has died, I will come and get you out of here. If I promise to take you safely away, will you come with me?" "Yes," she said. "Of course I will." So now I took her hand in mine again and put my ring on her finger. I had kept it in my pocket since the day I had first brought it to her. This time she kept it, though she cried and held my hand tightly. "Oh, John, this can never, never be," she said.